Okay, welcome everyone to the fourth reading of the Theaetetus. So, as last time, I would ask if there's someone willing to give a summary of what we discussed last time.
I remember one new distinction that he made, which was about the senses and them being instruments or things by which we perceive reality, or reality is perceived through our senses, as opposed to them being reality. That finally came up.
Okay, you probably talking about the notion of semaion or representations with different layers.
But that the senses is the thing that perceives any and all of those, right? And so then what's the relationship of the senses to the different simians, I guess?
Absolutely, because the senses perception being the first semaion. I see Helen raise her hand.
Yeah, well, on the last episode, we were talking about the number 4, number 5, number 6, which is the unity of virtue being beauty, goodness, and truth. And we also associated beauty with the soul, and justice and goodness with the spirit, and valor and humanity, and truth with awareness, wisdom. And we also talked about the importance of education, because education brings forth all those, that unity of virtue.
Absolutely, because the lower trigram, or the first 3 layers, are what we call the animal kingdom, obsessed with the what questions, and the divine mind is defined by the why questions. And you talk about the very important question of the unity of the virtues, and that unity of the virtues can be summarized by the concept or the idea, or rather the being of awareness. And you also talk about the active mode of beauty, goodness, and truth. The active mode of beauty, as you said, is justice. The active mode of goodness is valor and humanity. And the active mode of truth is wisdom.
What was the middle, where the soul, the spirit, and the awareness? What is that called, as like you call the active mode being justice, valor, humanity, and wisdom? Like what do you call the soul spirit thing?
Yeah, the active mode is when those timeless forms manifest in our daily life, okay? Because beauty is the timeless form, but the active mode are mathematics, justice, kindness, architecture, philosophy, literature, and so on. Okay, so those are the things that manifest themselves in true reality in our daily life, if you want. I chose only justice because justice is a cardinal element in the big kingdom of beauty. But there are many things in that big kingdom of that timeless form of beauty. And what is very important is that those 3 major timeless forms, beauty, goodness, and truth, they represent what Socrates called the unity of the virtues. Okay, what is common between the 3? What is common between the 3 is awareness, because that awareness will give you a meta representation of the animal mind. Okay, when I say that the 6 layers of the mind can be discussed as semaion 1 to 6, it's not false. But if we want to make a little pedantic distinctions, you have semaion 1, 2, 3, okay, for the animal mind, but at 4, 5, 6, with the timeless form of beauty, goodness, and truth, to be pedantic, we need to call them not representation, but meta representation, meaning that you have the awareness of what is happening with the layers 1, 2, and 3. And you discuss truly very important concepts of what we discussed last time.
Speaking in Platonic terminology, couldn't we say that the lower half are imitations or intimations of the real thing? They're not the real thing, that the top half, beauty, truth, and goodness, are the real thing? but the simian one being sense perception, the second being the manipulation or, alteration of those senses, and the third being the groups and the authorities that get together to define the reality of those, right? To give a narrative to them, I guess. So those are all technically, they're not the real thing. And Plato's talking about the real thing, which requires us coming from the top down to then perceive these others, to understand them in their proper place.
Yeah. Well, the real thing here is the timeless things, if you want, or and what are the imitation? They are not timeless. They are in chronology, in chronos, or if you prefer, in doxa, in opinion. It doesn't mean that they don't exist. They exist, but they are not in the order of being, of the timeless being, manifesting under the three major forms of beauty, goodness, and truth. And I think that the word imitation that you use is perfectly Platonic. I share that understanding.
It's really wild to think about, what you say, they're not false. It's just that they're incomplete.
Yes.
Levels 1, 2, and 3 are just incomplete. But when you move into beauty, goodness, and truth, it's really amazing to think of the unity of it, because like thinking about justice is beautiful, and a lack of justice is ugly.
Exactly. And that is the
truth
root of morality.
is, I'm sorry, what?
And I said that is the root of true morality, because true morality cannot be preached. You have to achieve or to realize in your heart, in your soul, that timeless form of beauty. So you will never do something that you feel to be ugly.
Oh, wow. And then the thing that just knocked my socks off was when you were talking about the actual real meaning of education, to bring forth from within and to remember. So yeah, real morality cannot be preached. It has to be brought forth from within, and it has to be a remembering of who we truly are. Oh, wow.
I'm very happy with your enthusiasm, Susan, because it's truly enthusiastic.
I feel like I am a child enjoying the playground.
Yeah, and I think that we managed to tackle everything that is truly important: education versus training, the different semions, the why, the what question, and the why question, imitation versus reality. Okay, because for Plato, what is real must be timeless. If it's not timeless, it's not real. It's an imitation, as Dave said. It doesn't mean that the imitation doesn't exist. It exists, but at a level which is not timeless. I don't know if I forget some things. I think I just heard Kelly speaking.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the truth, goodness, and beauty. Would it be fair to say that we don't really learn truth, goodness, and beauty? It's more like we recognize it.
Yes, we remember it.
We resonate with it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, like we don't actually learn it, we don't study it, kind of thing.
We can have external stimuli to make us remember. For example, if you look at a classical painting, if you read a classical novel, if you read a classical poems, those external stuff can trigger a remembering inside us.
So I like to use
this. Go ahead.
Sorry, I like to use the term resonance.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't know, Paul, that you are Chinese.
Now, look, it has more to do with, and Matt has covered this in a number of ways, changes in cosmological theory, let's say the electric universe theory is one direction and everything like that. There's an awful lot that is coming out in terms of the connections at quantum molecular levels, all sorts of things that have to do with resonance.
Okay, cool.
And yeah, when I think of feelings and intuition and everything like that, I mean, intuition particularly is something that kind of resonates within you. It's a good analogy.
Absolutely. There's one thing that I don't want to forget in this summary. Can someone explain me the metaphor of the chariot and of the charioteer?
2 horses.
Or the number of horses you wish for?
6?
What?
Yeah.
Was it 6?
It can be 2, it can be 6, it can be 4. It depends on your explanation.
2 horses are pretty good.
Okay. Do you want to explain with 2 horses?
I want as many horses as I can control.
Well, to be honest, I kind of forgot exactly, but we have to control both.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want
Was
one
it
to go one way, one to go the other way.
Yes.
Was that your senses and your emotions? Is that the
Your
2
passion.
horses?
Yeah,
Yes,
your passion.
exactly. And I like very much the expression, the presence of the charioteer or the absence of the charioteer, because I try to avoid the word control, even if I admit I used it last time. If your charioteer is present, meaning the timeless form of beauty, goodness, and truth, meaning your soul, your inner cosmos, and the self, meaning awareness, which is the unity of the virtues, the chariot being your body and the horses being your emotions and your intellect. So if the charioteer is present, your horses and your chariot wouldn't be under your guidance and not controlled by others. So ultimately, who is the master in that metaphor?
The chariot.
I need to be the master of my own ship.
Yes,
Yeah.
the charioteer. But
Charioteer.
Danielle, you wanted to say something, Danielle?
No, that was my answer.
I
The
don't know.
person who drives the horse, like it's the awareness that the presence of the charioteers is present toward himself, makes him oh, I'm sorry, it's hard for me to explain it in English, but makes him able to, is present, makes him to be able to not master, but kind of manage the horses and the chariot.
Exactly. I think you said the key word, awareness, because awareness is the key word for the unity of the virtues. Okay. Once again, the timeless form in the passive mode, beauty, goodness, and truth. Being in the active mode, the 4 cardinal virtues of justice, inner sense of justice, valor, humanity, and wisdom. And what binds together those timeless forms or those cardinal virtues is the presence of awareness. Okay, so going back to the image, the metaphor of the charioteer, the presence of awareness will make spontaneously your chariot and your horses go along or be guided by you rather than be controlled by others. Okay, others will enter into your mind by conditioning, by brainwashing, by predictively programming, by gaslighting, and those operations can work only if there is the absence of awareness.
I have a question, Quan. On page 83, when we read the little the horse. He speak about wooden horses, and I pondered that in my head, and I was like, why did he choose to say wooden horses? Like, because it's lifeless. A
The
wooden
wooden
horse
horse,
is lifeless.
the wooden horse is the Trojan horse.
Yeah, that's the reference.
I made that connection too, but it was, I'm curious to know if there's a reason for him
Yeah.
to use the,
It's an allusion to the Trojan horse.
okay, okay.
Yeah, but
And-
I think that, John, I would like to expand on your explanation. The
Okay.
Trojan horse is a symbol for the manipulations of other people putting stuff in your mind, okay? Because let's not forget the Trojan horses was used to deceive the people inside Troy. There are many possible explanations, but it always go back to that, okay? The wooden horses are horses that have been made by others. So always the idea that it's not you, okay? Let's not forget that the difference between the animal mind and the divine mind is that the divine mind is your true self that you remember, and the animal mind has been given to you by training, okay? And the people having trained you, they can have good intentions. They are not necessarily oligarchs wanting to brainwash you or to gaslight you, but good intention are not enough, okay? You have to remember the timeless forms in order to be truly autonomous, meaning having your own laws inside you, from your heart, from your soul. Autos nomos, having your own laws.
Merci.
Anything else before we keep on with page 84?
I just want to say one little thing about the goodness, truth, and beauty. Like personally, I'm kind of like Christian based, and I associate those three words with God, and it just helps me during the course of my day. You know, when I'm doing things, I try and focus. I focus on God, which is basically truth, goodness, and beauty, and it just helps. Helps with the day.
Well, I cannot contradict what you just said. Yes, I agree.
Who's going to be Theaetetus, and just make sure all our characters are ready to go.
Yeah. Okay, so everybody is ready to go or to keep on at page 84. So Socrates is John, Theaetetus, Paul, do you incarnate the Theaetetus plus Theodorus today, or
No.
someone else?
I'll certainly do Theaetetus, but if you want me to do Theodorus as well, I'll do that too, but somebody else should read that.
Okay, so so you want to be Theaetetus today, Paul?
For consistency's sake, yes, but
Okay.
I don't know, you know, like last week, there was very little for me to read, and Susan ended up doing an awful lot more as Theodore. I'm happy to go either way.
Okay. Choose one of the two.
Yeah, Theodore doesn't talk much now. It's now.
I'll go with Theaetetus then.
Okay, so who wants to be Theodorus? Don't be
And
shy. Don't be
I
shy.
can't-
He doesn't.
I
You
can if
don't-
nobody else wants to.
Okay. Thank you very much, Declan. Thank you. Thank you.
Theodore doesn't show up for quite a while.
Okay, that's what I've seen.
Okay, so let's go. Page 84.
On the
Theaetetus
top of the
talk.
page? Okay,
Yeah.
it's Theaetetus. Well, I think it is in this way rather than in that other.
Now, why do I give you this accurate distinction? Is it to inquire whether there be not someone and the same principle in us all by which we realize black or white through the medium of the eyes, and other sensations through other organs? And whether, if asked, you will be able to refer all such impressions to the body alone? And perhaps it is better for you to give your views about them by way of answer, than that I should be so very particular in your behoof. And now tell me, Do you not assign to the body all the several faculties by which you perceive hot or hard or light or sweet things? Or do you think they belong to something else?
To nothing else.
Will you also be willing to admit that what you perceive through one faculty, it is impossible to perceive through another? For instance, through seeing, you cannot get the impressions you do from hearing, or through hearing, those of seeing.
Of course, I shall allow that.
Then, if you have any mental conception about both, you would not be said to have a sensible perception of that through either organ, any more than you would have of both through only one.
Certainly not.
Well, now on the subject of voice and color, in the first place, you have this idea about both, that they have being.
I do.
Also, that each is different from each, but the same as itself.
Of course.
And that both make two, and each is one.
That also is true.
Well, are you not also able to make up your mind whether they are like or unlike to each other?
Perhaps.
Then through what faculty do you entertain all these notions about them? For it is not possible to realize any common property respecting them either by hearing or by sight. And there is this further proof of what we assert. If the question could reasonably be asked about both, have they any salt in them or not? You are aware that you would be able to state with what faculty you would put this to the test, and that proves to be neither sight nor hearing, but something different.
Why, of course it is, being the faculty we have through the tongue.
Well said. But through what comes the faculty that makes known to you the common property of all and the special property of each? What you call the being or the non-being, and the other properties of them that we just now inquired about. What organs or instruments will you assign to all these as the means by which our sentient faculty has perception of them severally?
You mean their being or non-being, likeness and unlikeness, their identity or difference, their oneness or any other number they may possess. It is plain, too, that your question refers to oddness or evenness and other conditions of that kind. You want to know through which of the bodily faculties we obtain a mental conception of these things.
You follow my meaning admirably, Theaetetus. What I ask is precisely this.
Upon my word then, Socrates, I couldn't tell you. But this I can say, that there does not seem to me to be any special organ at all of this nature, as there is to those other sensible impressions. It appears to me that the soul by its own efforts takes into consideration the common properties in all these cases.
Indeed, Theaetetus, you are a good-looking fellow, and not, as Theodore said of you, plain-featured. For one who says well is well-mannered and well-born and bred. And besides your good replies, you have done me good by ridding me of a great deal of talk, if you say that the soul examines some points by itself, and others through means of the bodily faculties. That was the very opinion I held myself. But I wanted you to hold it too.
Well, that certainly is my idea of the matter.
To which of these faculties then do you refer the being of the objects of our impressions? For this is the first and chief consideration in them all.
My part, I refer it to those conceptions which the soul by
You
itself
refer
tries
to
to
the
attain
same, the likeness or unlikeness, the identity or difference of them.
Yes.
What are we say of their fairness or foulness, their goodness or badness?
It appears to me that these are matters of which the soul, in an especial manner, considers the being in their mutual relations by drawing analogies in itself between the past, the present, and the future.
Stay now. Is it not through the touch that the soul must get a perception of the hardness of what is hard and lightness of the softness of what is soft?
It is.
But the existence of such qualities as hardness or softness, their nature and their antagonism to each other, and again, the existence of such antagonism, the soul endeavors to determine for us without any external aid, by gradually attaining these notions and by comparing the one with the other.
Certainly it does.
Some of these effects, then, I mean those which reach the soul through the medium of the body, are felt at their very birth by the instinct of nature, by both man and animals. But the reasonings about them, in respect of their existence and their use, come only by time and through much trouble and instruction, to such as do attain to them at all.
That is undoubtedly the case.
Is it possible then for anyone to get to the truth if he has not realized the fact of existence?
It is not.
And if one misses the true view of anything, will he ever have a correct knowledge of it?
Of course not, Socrates.
Then it is not in the feelings produced that real knowledge consists, but in the reasoning about them. For in this, as it appears, it is possible to realize being and truth, whereas in mere perception it is impossible.
Seems so.
Do you then call conception the same as perception, when there are such differences between the two?
Not in fairness, at least.
What name then do you assign to the latter? I mean, the seeing, hearing, smelling, or the feeling of getting warm or cold.
I call it the having a sense of such effects. What other name can I give it?
Then you call it by the general term sensation?
I have no better term for it.
But that, we say, is unable to get at truth, since it cannot realize being.
It cannot.
And therefore not knowledge either.
No.
Then Theaetetus, perception and exact knowledge, never can be the same.
It appears not, Socrates, and by this argument more plainly than by any other, it has become manifest that knowledge is something different from sensation.
Yes, but surely it was not for this that we began our conversation, that we might discover what knowledge is not, but that we might know what it is. However, we have made so much progress as no longer to look for it in sensation at all, but in that property of the soul, whatever name it may have, when by its own reasonings it concerns itself with the nature of things that exist.
But surely, Socrates, that is called, if I mistake not, forming an opinion.
You think rightly, my friend. And now consider again from the beginning. After wiping clean from your mind all previous impressions, whether you get any clearer view now that you have advanced to this point. And first tell me again what knowledge is.
To call it opinion generally, Socrates, is impossible, since there is such a thing as false opinion. But it seems likely that true opinion is knowledge, and let that be my answer for the present. For if it should appear not to be so as we go on, as it now does appear, we will then try to give some other definition.
That is the right way to speak, Theaetetus, with a hearty earnestness, rather than with the timidity you showed at first in replying. For if we do this, we shall gain one of two things. Either we shall get hold of what we are going after, or we shall be less disposed to think that we know what we don't know. And such a return as that for our trouble is not to be thought lightly of. And so now, what say you? There being two kinds of opinion, one that is true and the other that is false. Do you define knowledge to be true opinion?
I do. That is the view I now incline to.
Is it not then worth our while to take up again and discuss the question of opinion?
What particular question do you allude to?
One which somehow or other gives me anxiety now, as it has done often before, so that I have been in great perplexity in considering it not only with myself, but with others, from not being able to define what this feeling is and how it is produced in us.
What feeling?
One's having a false opinion. Hence, I am even now in doubt whether we should let it pass or consider it in some other way than we did shortly before.
Of course we should, Socrates, if there seems even the smallest need for doing so. Daisy. Only just now, you and Theodore said well about leisure, that in matters of this kind, there is nothing to hurry us.
You are right in reminding me. Perhaps it will be out of place to pursue the question as, perhaps it will not be out of place to pursue the question as one would hunt on a track. For of course it is better to get through a small matter well than a great subject insufficiently.
Certainly.
Well then, what have we to say about it? Do we affirm that an opinion may sometimes be false, and that some of us hold false, others true views, such being our natures respectively?
We do maintain that.
Is there not then this alternative for us in all subjects and severally in each, that we either know or do not know it? For of learning and forgetting, as intermediate between knowing and not knowing, I say nothing at present, since it has nothing to do with the subject now.
Well then, Socrates, there is nothing left for it but either to know or not know on every subject.
It becomes necessary then that a man who forms an opinion should form it on something which he either does or does not know.
It must be so.
But surely it is alike impossible for one who knows something not to know it, and for one who does not know to know it.
Of course.
Then, this being granted, does he who holds false opinions think that what he knows is not this, but something else of what he knows, and thus, while he knows both, is he also in ignorance about both?
Why that would be impossible, Socrates.
Then does he imagine what he does not know to be some other of the things he does not know? That would be, for one who does not know either Socrates or Theaetetus by sight, to take it into his head that either Socrates is Theaetetus or Theaetetus Socrates.
How can that possibly be?
Well, surely a man does not think that what he knows is what he does not know, nor on the other hand that what he does not know is what he knows.
That would be marvelous indeed.
Then what way remains in which one can have a false opinion? For beyond the limits I have mentioned, it is impossible to have an opinion at all, since there can be nothing that we do not either know or not know. And it has been shown that in none of these is it possible to have false opinions.
Very true.
Perhaps then, in considering the question before us, we must not pursue the track of knowledge and non-knowledge, but that of being and not being.
How is that?
We must consider whether it be not simply true that one who thinks that something possesses qualities that it has not must of necessity have a false opinion, however correct his general views may be.
Why, that again appears likely, Socrates.
What then? What are we to say, Theaetetus? If someone should put this question, is what we are speaking of possible to anyone? That is, can any human being ever conceive what is not, either abstractedly or about any existing thing? Well, we, I suppose, shall reply to this, yes, when in holding an opinion he holds what is not true. Or how must we state the case?
As you have.
Is then such a thing as this possible in other faculties besides thought?
As what?
as this. I mean, if a man sees something and yet sees nothing.
Of course it is not.
Yet surely if he sees some one object, he sees something of things that exist. Or do you think that this one is sometimes among things non-existent?
No, I do not.
Then he who sees one object sees a thing that does exist.
It appears so.
And so a person who hears must hear some one sound and therefore an effect that is real.
Yes.
And he who touches something touches some one object, and by consequence, some object that actually exists.
That too may be granted.
But does not he who forms an opinion form it about something?
He must do so.
And if about one thing, then about an existing thing?
I grant that.
Then a man who thinks that which is not thinks nothing.
It seems so.
But surely one who thinks nothing does not think at all.
That must be so, as it seems.
It is not possible then to think what is not, either about existing things or in the abstract.
It appears not.
Then holding false opinions is something different from believing what is not.
It does seem different.
Then neither according to this view, nor according to the line of argument we just before pursued, is there any such thing as false opinion in us.
I quite see that there is not.
Then must we call it false opinion as taking place in some such way as this?
How?
Must we say that false opinion is an allodoxy? By which I mean when a man affirms that something of what really exists is something else of what really exists, mistaking in his mind the one for the other. For according to this view, he does always think what is, only one thing in place of another, and thus, being wrong in the subject of his inquiry, he might properly be said to hold a false opinion.
Now you seem to me to have spoken most correctly. For when, for instance, a man thinks something bad instead of good, or good instead of bad, then he truly thinks what is false.
It is evident, Theaetetus, that you have a contempt for me and hold me in no fear.
Why in the world do you say that?
I suppose you think I shall not object to that expression truly false, by asking you if it is possible for quick to take place slowly, or light heavily, or any other contrary not according to its own nature, but according to that of its opposite, and so in a way contrary to itself. This little matter, however, I will not dwell upon, that you may have some real ground for encouragement. But you accept, as you say, the view that to have a false opinion is to think one thing instead of another.
Yes, I do.
In your opinion, then, it is possible to take in one's apprehension one thing for another thing, and not for what the former thing really is.
That is just it.
Then whenever one's mind performs this act, must it not also think about both, or at all or at all events about one?
That is necessary.
Either at once or in turn.
Precisely.
Now, do you mean what I do by this work? Thinking?
What do you call it?
I call it a reasoning process, which the soul goes through with itself about the subject it may be considering, to deliver an opinion to you without full knowledge. That is what it seems to me to do in thinking, nothing else than to converse, questioning and answering itself, affirming this or denying that. And when at length, after determining it more or less quickly, by taking a survey and applying itself to the task, it says the same about it and no longer doubts. We take this as its opinion. So that I call the forming an opinion a kind of affirming, and an opinion, a discourse spoken, not indeed to another, nor in audible words, but silently to oneself. What say you?
I agree.
Whenever then a person thinks one thing is another thing, then he also asserts to himself that this is that.
Of course.
Could you move up the recall to mind now whether you ever said to yourself, as in the form of a maxim, that beyond a doubt, fair is foul, or wrong is right, or to sum up every such case under one general head. Consider whether you ever tried to persuade yourself that beyond a doubt one thing is some other thing, or, on the contrary, never even in a dream went so far as to say to yourself that assuredly these odd numbers are even, or anything of that kind.
The truth is that, as you have last put it,
And you suppose that anyone beside yourself, either in sound health or out of his mind, seriously said to himself, and with the intention of persuading himself, that that ox must be a horse, or these two must be one.
I don't think so, upon my word.
Then, if saying to oneself means forming an opinion, no one, in speaking of or thinking of both of two things, and realizing both in his mind, will be likely to say or think that one was the other. Indeed, you will have to give up the very phrase other, for I put the proposition thus: no man thinks that foul is fair, or anything of the like contrary nature.
Yes, Socrates, I resign other, as you say, and I agree with you.
Then in having an opinion about both, he cannot think that one is the other.
So it seems.
But surely if he thinks only about one, and not at all about the other, he will never think that the one is the other.
If that is true, he would then be obliged to realize that which he has no opinion about.
Then one cannot have allodoxy in thinking of both, any more than in thinking of one of two things. So that if one shall define false opinion to mean thinking this is that, he will hardly say what is much to the purpose, since it has been shown there cannot be such a thing as false opinion according to this, any more than according to the former views.
It seems not.
But surely, Theaetetus, if it shall appear that there really is no such thing, we shall be compelled to make many strange admissions.
Of what kind?
I won't tell you, till I have considered and tried the question in all its bearings. For I should feel ashamed for us if, while our doubts are yet upon us, we should feel ourselves forced to make such concessions as I speak of. No, when we have found the truth and have become free, we shall then be able to speak of those others as having to bear it, while we ourselves stand clear of ridicule. If, however, we find ourselves perplexed after all our efforts, then I suppose we must submit to be humbled and give ourselves up to the argument, like seasick voyagers, to trample on us and treat us as it pleases. Here, therefore, the one way that I can find for bringing this inquiry to an end.
You have only to say it.
I shall say that we were wrong in allowing some time ago that it is impossible for a man to think that what he knows is something that he does not know, and so to be mistaken about it. On the contrary, I shall contend that in a certain sense it is possible.
Do you mean, what I surmised at the time when you said it, that there may be a mistake of this kind? I, on some occasion, knowing Socrates and seeing at a distance someone else, whom I do not, fancied that this is the Socrates whom I know. For certainly in such a case, what you speak of does occur.
We gave up the question then because it seemed to make us at once to know what we know and not to know it.
Certainly.
Then don't let us put it so, but in the following way, and perhaps it will fall in with our present view, or perhaps it will still hold out in opposition. But the fact is, we are caught in such a strait that it has become necessary to turn every argument and put it to the test. Consider, therefore, whether there is anything in what I say. Is it possible for one who did not know something before to learn it afterwards?
It is, of course.
And also another thing afterwards, and again another.
Certainly.
Assume then, for the sake of argument, that there is in our souls a waxen tablet for receiving impressions. In one of us a greater, in other a less, in one of pure, in another of unclarified wax. In some harder, in some softer, in others of medium quality.
I assume that.
Let us further say that it was the gift of the mother of the muses, memory, and that upon this tablet, whenever we desire to remember something that we have seen or heard or conceived the idea of in our own thoughts, we take off an impression by holding it under our sensations or thoughts, just as when we take the impression of gems in our rings. Thus, whatever is taken off on the tablet that we remember and know, so long as the form remains in our minds. But when it has been effaced or cannot be taken off at all, then we forget and do not know it.
That is so.
Observe now whether a person who is considering something of what he sees or hears, and therefore with a knowledge of it, can be said to have a false opinion about it in some such way as this.
In what way?
By thinking that what he knows is at one time what he knows, at another time what he does not. For we were wrong in our former argument when we said this was impossible.
And how do you state the case now?
It should be stated thus in the cases in question, and a new distinction must be made between them. First, if a man knows something and has the remembrance of it in his mind, but not a sensible perception, he cannot possibly think it to be something else of what he knows, while he retains the impression of this latter, but has not at the time a perception of it. Secondly, it is equally impossible for a man to think that what he knows is something that he does not know and has no impression of at all, or that what he does not know is some other thing that he does not know, or what he does not know is something that he does know, or to think that what he has a sensible perception of is some other thing which he also knows by his senses, or that what he has a sense of is something that he has not a sense of, or what he has not a sense of is something else that he is not a sense of, or what he is not a sense of is something he has a sense of. We may go yet further and say it is yet more impossible, if that can be, to think that what one both knows and feels and also has an impression of in accordance with the feeling is something else that one knows and feels and has an impression of as well as of the other, and according also to one's feeling. It is also impossible when one knows something and perceives it and retains a right impression of it to think it's something else that one knows, or that one knows and feels also with right impression is something else that one feels, or what one neither knows nor feels is something else of what one neither knows nor feels, or what one neither knows nor feels is what one does not know, or what one neither knows nor feels is what one does not feel. All these are cases where it is in the highest degree impossible to have a false opinion in any of them. It remains, therefore, that in such cases as the following, if anywhere, false opinion may occur.
And what cases are these? Tell me, if perchance I derive some further knowledge from them, for at present I don't follow you.
In the cases where a man knows certain things or objects, he may think them some other of what he knows and has a present perception of. Or, secondly, of what he does not know, but yet has a perception of. Or, lastly, where he thinks that what he knows and feels is something else that he knows and feels.
Do we want to take a moment?
Theaetetus?
How's everybody?
Sorry.
Yeah. I would like to stop at the beginning of page 100, and I wouldn't explain why. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Sure. Okay. Now that I am left still further behind you, sorry. Now I am left still further behind you than I was before.
Then hear the case put in the reverse way. I, knowing Theodore, and retaining in my mind the impression of what he is like, and Theaetetus also in the same way, sometimes have the opportunity of seeing, touching, hearing, or by some other of my senses being aware of your presence, while sometimes I have not. And yet I remember you nonetheless, and so know you in my own consciousness. Is it not so?
Certainly.
So are we supposed to stop?
Yes. Okay. 2 pages ago, Theaetetus was complaining that he does not follow at all Socrates. Do you
Twice.
guys have the same impression?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Rather,
convoluted.
yes.
Convoluted, very convoluted.
Okay, I commend everyone for their valor, one of the 4 cardinal virtues.
Patience.
Humility. A good one.
Exactly. Wow, to say the truth is a combination of valor, wisdom, and humanity, and justice. So it's the 4 cardinal virtues combined.
But I think I have this Platon by Luc
Okay.
Brissot.
Oh yeah.
The Flammarion collected works. And I
Okay.
find it's a lot easier to read than this.
This 19th century translation.
This is 19th century English, which we're no longer used to.
Yes, exactly. But
So-
it has qualities. Okay, keep on, John. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, that's fine. It is simply that one gets a very different impression when one's reading in a modern translation in a different language
Okay.
than in an older translation in English, even if English is my mother tongue.
Okay. Since you are here tonight, would you like to share what you understood from the Flammarion translation before I give my little speech and ask my questions?
I haven't read this part in French, so I can't answer the question.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I would like to remind everyone that at the beginning of those 16 pages that we read, okay, from page 84 to page 100, there's something that is the key to all those speeches. What is that something? Okay, let's not forget that till page 84, we were essentially exploring that knowledge is senses perception. And after knowledge is sense perception, what is it? I see Susan with her hand up. Do you want to answer that question, Susan? Or do you have a comment?
Well, I have a comment question thing. Oops, I made you disappear off my screen. I wanted to say, but I'm also asking if I'm accurate. I didn't have a very easy time trying to follow what he was doing there, but I do get the impression that in trying to just be patient and follow the process, my mind is being expanded. My mind is being stretched. Is that accurate? Do other people experience that?
Yeah, even when we're reading it.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's like, even if you don't really understand what he is saying, your attempt to just patiently follow the process is causing your mind to grow and expand.
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot of repetitive language, kind of saying the same thing over and over again, or discerning, in a very fine manner between, this and that, between, I'm sorry, in relation to feelings, particularly perception.
Okay. There's a
There's-
word for that. Oh, sorry, Dave, go ahead.
What were you gonna say though?
Okay, no, go ahead. I would give my comment after.
I'm just like, yeah, I'm flexing my brain to bring it back to what was said in the previous times, and then with this, like, because he gives examples, right? Like that he does this thing where he throws out the theory and kind of lays it all out, and then the person's like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
And then he gives an example that then you go into a state of gentle confusion, and then he gives you something concrete by which you can apply it. So he's talking about perceptions and how we can perceive something. I remember like with the wine, you could be wine tastes sweet one time, but then if you're sick, the wine will taste sour. It's the same perception, and yet you have two different or understandings or knowledgeable experiences of the same thing. And here, the next sentence, Socrates says that after what we just read, he says, "Understand this then as the first point in what I wish to explain, that it is possible either to have or not have a perception through the senses of what one knows." Now,
Yes.
there was the wine example, and just before he talked about if you see Socrates from a distance or you think it's Socrates, but then you might look closer and either is or isn't. So you have a perception of a thing that you have knowledge of this thing, but then the perception of the thing you're seeing outward may or may not be that thing that you have. So you can perceive something that's not the thing, and you can either have knowledge of that thing that you're perceiving and be like, oh, it's not that thing, but I know, or that it is.
Yeah.
And so a thing can either you're perceiving the thing as you know it, or something that isn't it, but something that just makes you think it is. And that's what he said in the paragraph just before.
Yeah.
In the cases where a man knows certain things or objects, he may think them some other of what he knows and has a present perception of, other than what he knows and has a perception of. So he sees a salmon and he's only known sharks. So is it a shark? Is it just a baby shark? Or secondly, of what he does not know, but yet has a perception of. He's seen a squid, which he's never seen, and it's not a fish well, it is a fish, but you know what I mean? Or lastly,
Exactly.
where he thinks that what he knows and feels is something else that he knows and feels. So thought it was Socrates, but it was actually Platon or whatever. But he knows Socrates, and the perception, he might have mistaken one for the other depending on the distance. So the sense itself and knowledge of it can vary. If I'm trying to bring it all together, I can.
That's okay.
Pretty good summation of the last 10 pages we read.
Yes,
So
but express.
So Juan, you asked me about the Brisson's translation. So in the last page and a half that I read in English, his translation enumerates the different cases, which makes it a lot easier to separate them and to name them. You can talk about case 15 and go look at case 15 and read it, and then think about it, and then you can compare it to case 1 and so on and so forth. So there are actually 17 different cases. So if you feel like you're lost, it's when you're reading this for the first time, you're trying to keep track of 17 interrelated cases.
Yeah.
That's like keeping, I'm a computer programmer. You're
But
trying to do all this in your head in one time, the very first time you look at it. Good luck.
Yeah.
There could there could
But
be cases that he's not even mentioning. There could be more.
yes,
So
but
that,
I would say that
Um,
17 is good enough. I want to go to Helen before asking you the question to have the core concepts that will summarize the 17 cases.
Okay,
Okay.
I had a question about, what was he talking about when he was talking? It was kind of alarming when he was talking about the tablet, like being erased and stuff like that. That was, does that mean like I don't know, your morality could be erased? That was
No, it's about the intellect, and I will ask you a series of questions that will help you to synthesize those 17 cases or those 15 pages that we just read. Okay, so I want first to go back to Susan's comment. It's very good that by reading stuff, convoluted stuff like that, that you don't get mad and you don't get impatient. Okay, that is truly the attitude of the aristocratic man. Okay, playful exploration. Okay, first, because let's not forget that Platonic dialogues is not only at the level of the concepts, but also at the level of what is your attitude? How are you reacting to that? And do you have a meta representation of your emotional state precisely? Okay, are you capable to keep that enthusiasm, that curiosity, and that openness, mind broadness and openness, and be capable to say, wow, that's quite convoluted, I don't understand, and I would try to find some synthetic concept to understand that. Okay, so I would like to ask you guys a series of questions, and you will see that everything that we read can be summarized under 3 labels. Let's go back to page 85, 86. Okay, he said that now we are tackling the question of true belief. Okay, if you guys remember, the first layer of the mind is senses perception, the second layer is true belief or the intellect, and the third layer is pistis, or true belief with an account, with an explanation within a society, okay, given by your experts. From that clue that I'm giving you guys, that we are talking now of the second layer of the mind, of the intellect, I give you a second clue. In the senses perception, it's very easy, okay? It's only sense perception, with the eyes, with the ears, with the skin, the tactile sensations, and so on. But with the intellect, what do we have in the intellect category? Try to find some concepts. And before I forget, in this translation, the word intellect is not used. It's rather the word conception, but it's the same, okay? Intellect, conception.
I could say, like, from what I got out of it, my truth or my perception of truth is constantly changing. Like,
Okay, I
the
need
more
something.
I learn,
I need something more precise. But keep on.
well, the more I learn, the more I play around with the subject, I come up with another version of this truth, and it just seems to constantly change. Where it's going, I'm assuming it's getting more truthful. But
Okay, you
how
just
do I
said.
know that?
Okay, you just say something. You just say word. Did I hear you say word?
What do you mean word?
Because it's one of the baskets that I need on the level of conception or intellect. Word. Okay, I said to you guys that the 16 or 15 or 16 pages that we read from page 84 can be summarized with 3 concepts. Okay, one of those 3 concepts you just said it, word. Okay, what are the other 3? 2.
Thinking.
Sorry.
Thinking.
Thinking, I would say that it would be equivalent to intellect or conception. So it's not wrong, but it's not the other 2 baskets. Dave gave a good summary of what has been read. Okay, what do you have the impression with Dave reading or remembering of what has been said? Okay, suppose that you look at someone far away that you think that is Socrates, but it's not Socrates. Okay, what is that?
An impression.
Yeah.
No, but there's some, yes, but there's some impression. There's something stronger than impression. Try to find it. It begins with an I too.
Do you want to say, do you want to hear intuition?
No, intuition is of the divine mind.
Inference?
Is it the image that I have?
Okay, just John
The
said,
internal image of something, or?
yes, yes, yes. Okay, your answer and the answer, John's answer, I combined them. What I was looking for was imagination.
Mm,
Okay, so you have the notion of imagination in inference, and you have the notion of imagination in image, of course, or imagine. Now, what is the polar opposite of imagination, but in the same category? Okay, because imagination, psychologically speaking, is the reverse of something else.
Reality.
Truth?
Maybe, yes, but reality in your mind. How do you call reality in your mind?
Perception. I
No,
always-
that is direct. I'm speaking of something that has been stored in your mind.
Memory.
Memory, exact. Memory and imagination at the level of intellect are the two polar opposite, but having the same mechanism, okay? Because memory is store perception and imagination is projected memories with a combination of the divine mind, okay? But we are talking only of the intellect at the animal mind for the moment. So we have the three major concepts: memories, imagination, and words. How do you combine them to explain the 15 pages we just read? And take your time. I'm aware that is not an easy answer. And be aristocratic persons. Try anything.
Oh, wait, you said words, memory, and imagination?
Exactly, because the intellect, the level of concept or conception, you have the words, which is the core piece of intellect, okay? Words. But those words are inside a big mechanism called imagination and memory, who are two polar opposites, but the same in reality. And let's not forget, the layer just under is senses perception, okay? So you have the right to use sense of perception too in your answer.
Let's say somebody, like, what if somebody thinks, let's say they're pursuing love, they've had an experience of it in their past, or what they think is an experience of it, and then they're looking for it. You know, people go looking for all sorts of things, and then they may, let's say, get into a relationship and they think they're in love, but they may or may not be, right? There's different, you may have a memory of what you think that thing is, and you may think you know it and have found the thing that you believe you know, but you may or may not have. So you have a memory of a thing and you have a word for that thing, and then or imagination of it technically, which may or may not be true, but you have a perception of it which you associate with the real thing, right? The real thing being love. So you have a memory of a certain thing which you've called love. That's the word you put on it. And you imagine that it's the thing, which it may or may not be in reality. And in reality, absolutely. And you may or may not have found that thing that you believe you're looking for.
Awesome,
That's a
Dave.
bit
Awesome, Dave.
convoluted, but yeah.
No, awesome. And you show me that you understood. It's exactly that. Okay. The fact that Socrates played during 15 pages with all those convoluted and strange examples is precisely to bring forward the fact that when you use words, it's related to images or imagination and memories of that.
Memory.
That's why he used the metaphor of the wax, okay, receiving imprint. Now I see Helen's hand. Do you have something to say?
Tabula rasa.
No. mm-mm.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna state that sometimes your memory and your imagination can become mixed up or even together, where some of it could be a real memory, some of it could be imagination. I was just you know, yeah, that's fine. I was just
No, but you give in very few words what Socrates meant by his long speeches written on 15 pages. It's exactly that. I'm not saying that it explains
and so
everything.
you're saying that that's the false opinion?
Well,
what
what do you think? The idea is that Socrates is saying to us at that level of conception or intellect using words, we can have that phenomenon called imagination and memory. Okay, if I want to say things with very few words, that he expand on 15 pages and he seemed to play with Theaetetus. Maybe a little bit sadistically, if you want my opinion, but
yeah, mine too.
That's built into all of Plato's dialogues.
Oh, yes.
Well, when
Okay.
I can't see something clearly, I use my imagination.
And if I'm drawing on a memory, if I'm drawing on a picture of a Socrates in the distance, I'm relying on my memory.
Yeah.
They all tie in, yeah.
And
So
they play.
is there,
Sorry, keep on.
are you referring like, is it like one thing I think I learned, like memory and imagination, are they really opposites?
According to you, Kelly, I want to hear your opinion.
Well, I'm thinking where like there's some kind of balance. If they're opposites, then there's some kind of medium in between that.
And what is that medium?
I don't know. I want to say truth, but I'm afraid to. I don't know.
Well, that medium, last time, do you remember I asked you, if you want to remember something, what do you need? And you gave the right answer.
Oh, that was emotions.
Exactly. That's the common stuff between memory and imagination.
Okay, that helps.
Okay. Nowadays, we know enough neurobiology to describe the circuits inside the brain that would be activated when you want to remember something. Okay. You need to go through an experience having provoked in you a certain level of emotional answer to remember something, either that emotion is negative or positive, as we already discussed. For imagination, it's the same thing. Okay. You need an emotional trigger. So the common glue between imagination and memory is emotion. And now I would like to ask the following question. From what I just said in the last 30 seconds, how do you explain the metaphor of the tablets of wax given by Socrates?
Well, perhaps it should be clarified what the tablet of wax is.
Yeah.
Back in those days, that was the equivalent of the notebook. So you had a little hard thing that's scraped that formed images in the wax, and it wasn't really erasable.
But in a way it was, though, no?
It was, yeah, you could re-knead, depending how solid the wax is, you could re-knead it and start over again. But the more you did that, the worse it became, of course. But that, and of course it can harden. Once it hardens, it can no longer be modified, and so on and so forth. So that's what the physical device he's talking about. And that's what boys used in schools.
Didn't
And if it's
Homer use
erased,
that?
I was gonna say, if it's erased, then that's where you forget, right?
Didn't
So-
Homer use the example of the wax, like for the soul, like the impressions? Doesn't that come? I think there's a metaphor
Yes,
that comes
yes,
from
yes,
Homer.
yes. It's a metaphor for the memory.
But if you heat up that wax, then it becomes pliable again, right?
Yes,
Right.
thank you, Susan. Thank you, Susan. And that
Because
heat,
I always think of it like a chalkboard in my
Yeah.
mind. But when we were reading that part of it, it just made me think about this season of time that we're in, that so many people are just awakening and seeking truth. And I think all of us, we wouldn't even be here if we weren't open-minded and seeking truth and seeking to grow. And you find that there's a lot of things that are, I don't know, set in your memory, that those were things that were imposed on us, that we were trained that way, but they're not really truth. And those are gradually falling away, and we're discovering more and more truth as we go along.
exact. Now, it means that when,
rediscovering.
yes, it means that when you have the heat or the power of the soul, you can transform your original tablet of wax and write what you want.
Yay.
This is beautiful. What's that fun?
Or we
That's a
can
good
Well,
forget
metaphor,
it.
that one.
Well, we are in a group characterized by beauty, goodness, and truth, of course.
Okay, what did Paul say? And then what did Kelly say?
I was gonna say, yeah, we can write something new, but I'm thinking tomorrow morning, I'm gonna wake up and I might forget like a lot of, well, I will forget a lot of what transpired today. Like,
But I think
Yes.
that for that you have to remember what Johnny von Neumann said about mathematics. A lot of it is just getting used to the notation.
exactly, yeah.
So you could change the exact words that Johnny von Neumann used pertaining to mathematics, but you have to get used to the language. You have to get used to the kinds of thinking. You have to get used to the way the discourse is going.
Like
Yeah,
repetition.
I mean, it's just 2 days ago I started to read Aristotle's Physics, and it was like my eyes were like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I ended up reading just the first 2 books. It's like 30 pages 3 times before I felt I had some idea of what was being talked about. So I can't say fully understand, but at least now I have a better understanding. I think the same would hold true if we were to reread these passages that we read tonight, and perhaps stopped not after 15 pages, but after 2. Let's say, all right, where are we right now? Then we would all have a better understanding, and each of us individually would have a better understanding as well.
Right.
I think it really is true that we are literally building new neural pathways in our minds as we go through these readings. And thinking about, even if I didn't understand what he was saying or where he was going, I felt like my mind is being expanded. Just reminds me of what Matt Ehret has said about it's good to be punching above your weight class. Our minds are being exercised. And so they are growing and making the new neural pathways and new connections so that we can have more real knowledge and understanding. That process really is happening.
Absolutely. And you're more capable to see the words and the memories and the imaginations as tools and not absolute.
I had a friend who was a Marxist philosopher, and he was a brilliant man, and he talked nonstop. And Being a New York Jew, this was normal for him, but he was a brilliant man, and he had a stroke. And instead of giving up, he kept fighting. So he was obviously so much slower than before. But he kept reading, he kept trying to talk, he tried trying to think, and so on and so forth. And over the 2-3 years after his stroke, his mind became more and more plastic again. It never reached the same stage as it had been before his stroke. But the fact that he was continually trying to understand and develop, I'm sure he was developing all sorts of new neural passages, as you called them.
Yeah, exactly. Do anyone have a important comment to before we keep on? Okay. I suggest that we read till the page 105. Okay, we still have about 30 minutes. Let's read till the page 105, and let's take the last 15 minutes to discuss from 100 to 105. Is it okay with you guys?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
Well, perhaps we should start the section which ends at the previous page.
Yeah. You mean the last 2 paragraphs of 99?
No, the last. I guess Theaetetus says something, and then I respond.
Okay, I would
Now
say
I'm left still further behind you.
yeah, go to the page 99 and Theaetetus, and what cases are these?
Oh, but are we going to enumerate them all? It's hard.
No,
Okay.
because
Okay.
we just finished at the first paragraph of page 100, but I don't mind that we go back at
Okay.
page 99 and
Okay.
read from Theaetetus and
Sure.
what cases are these?
Okay, here we go. And what cases are these? Tell me if perchance I derive some further knowledge from them. For at present, I don't follow you.
In the cases where a man knows certain things or objects, he may think them some other of what he knows and has a present perception of. Or secondly, of what he does not know, but yet has a perception of. Or lastly, where he thinks that what he knows and feels is something else that he knows and feels.
Now I am left still further behind you than I was before.
Then hear the case put in the reverse way. I, knowing Theodore, and retaining in my mind the impression of what he is like, and Theaetetus also in the same way, sometimes have the opportunity of seeing, touching, hearing, or by some other of my senses being aware of your presence, while sometimes I have not. And yet I remember you nonetheless, and so know you in my own consciousness. Is it not so?
Certainly.
Understand this then as the first point in what I wish to explain, that it is possible either to have or not to have a perception through the senses of what one knows.
True.
Is it not also possible that what one does not know, one may, if so be, not perceive by sense at all, or one may only so perceive it?
That also may happen.
See then if you follow me any better now. Socrates knows at sight both Theodore and Theaetetus, but actually sees neither, and has no other perception of either. I say that he is not likely ever to form an opinion in his own thoughts that Theaetetus is Theodore. Is there any truth in what I say?
Yes, that is certainly true.
This then is the first of the cases I put to you just now.
It is.
And the second is that knowing one of you and not the other, and having a present sense of neither, again I should hardly think that the one whom I know is the other whom I do not.
Rightly said.
The third is, if I neither know nor perceive either, I am not likely to think that one whom I don't know is another whom I don't know. I need not repeat to you all the cases I mentioned before. In which I can never have a false opinion about you and Theodore, whether I know or do not know you both, or know one and not the other. You must suppose you have heard them all stated again in the same order. And what I say about the senses, generally you must understand in the same way, if you follow my meaning.
I do.
There remains then only this case in which we can have a false opinion. I know you and Theodore. I retain in the waxen tablet I spoke of the impressions of you both, as if they had been stamped on it by seals. Well, at some distance, and so not with sufficient clearness, I see you both together. And I make an effort in assigning the proper mark of each to the particular sight of him, to put the sense of sight exactly upon its seal mark, that I may thence obtain a mental recognition. But I fail in my efforts. And like persons who put a right shoe on the left foot, I take one for the other, and apply my sight of one to my mental impression of the other. Or, as happens to objects seen in a mirror, which causes the right sides to pass into the left, I have a change taking place in me, and so get wrong as to the identity. In this case, then occurs the allodoxy that we spoke of, and so the having a false opinion.
Why, Socrates, what happens to one's opinion is marvelously like what you described.
Further than this, there may be mistaken opinion when I know both of two persons, and of one. Besides the knowledge, I have also the perception, but not the perception of the other, and so have knowledge of him, not in the way of actual perception. This is a case which I put before, and you did not then seem to understand me.
I did not.
Well, I meant this: knowing the one and also perceiving him, that is, having a knowledge of him by perception, one can never think that he is another of those whom he knows and perceives, i.e., if he has a knowledge of him too by perception. Was it not so?
It was.
But then we omitted the particular case we now describe, that false opinion may occur when a man knows and sees both persons, or has any other kind of perception of them both, but has the mental impression of each not agreeing with the actual perception. For then he is like a bad archer who hits a wrong mark in shooting and so misses, which is what we call deception.
That is a likely view of the case.
And further, when there is present perception to one of the impressions, but not to the other, and when a person applies the mental impression of the object of which he has not a present sense to that of which he has, in this way the mind is also quite deceived. To put the matter quite briefly, where a man has no knowledge and never had any perception of an object, he cannot, as it seems, be deceived, and there can be no false opinion. That is, if there is any truth in the views we are now putting forward. It is on objects that we both know and have perception of that opinion turns, and on these alone that it is engaged, and it becomes either false or true opinion accordingly as it is applied. If it brings the seal mark and the impressions that belong to it right down upon and exactly opposite to the object seen, then it is a true opinion. If aslant and sideways, then it is a false one.
And is this not, and is not this, Socrates, a very fair account of the matter?
You will say so still more when you hear the following considerations. For the holding of truth is a fair, just as being in error is a foul thing.
Of course.
Well, now they tell us that truth and error result from these causes. When the wax in the mind's tablet is deep and smooth, and there is plenty of it, and it is sufficiently softened, then the ideas that came upon us through the senses, leaving their marks on this heart's core, as Homer called it, hinting at the resemblance of Kear to Kyros. Then these impressions, being made clear and distinct and deep enough, are lasting, and persons who are so favored by nature are in the first place apt at learning. Secondly, they have good memories. And thirdly, they do not misapply the marks left by the sensations, but form true opinions. For as the marks are clear and are not crowded, they at once assign each object to its proper place in their memory. And then it is that we say impressions are really true, and men so constituted are wise men. Don't you think so?
I do, decidedly.
And when one's heart has hairs in it, which you know, that all-wise poet referred to, or when it is dirty and not a pure wax, or very moist or very hard, then those who have soft tablets learn easily indeed, but are apt to forget. Those who have hard are slow to learn, but retentive. Those whose hearts have hairs in, or are rough or gritty, or full of earth or dirt mixed up with them, have the impressions made on their tablets indistinct, as those also have whose tablets are hard, for the impressions have no depth, or too soft, for then they become obscure, through so soon running one into the other. And if, beside all these faults, the impressions fall upon and interfere with each other through want of space, and a man happens to be small-minded, in this case, they are still more indistinct than in the other. All these persons then are likely to have false opinions, for whenever they hear or see or conceive any idea, they are unable at the instant to assign each to each. But being slow and prone to put things in the wrong places, they see wrongly, hear wrongly, think wrongly about almost everything. And such persons we don't call wise, but on the contrary, mistaken as to what really is, and uninformed.
No man could possibly give a truer account of the matter, Socrates.
Must we then affirm that there are such things in us as false opinions?
Oh, certainly.
And true opinions too.
And true.
Do you think that by this time it has been determined with sufficient certainty that, as a matter of fact, these two kinds of opinion do exist?
Most decidedly so.
Move it up, please. I am afraid, Theaetetus, that a man who is a twaddler runs a good chance of really being a formidable as well as a disagreeable character.
Why so? In respect of what do you say this?
From a feeling of vexation at my own dullness and twaddling in the true sense of the word. For what else can a man call it when one drags words to and fro, unable from sheer stupidity to be convinced, and so finds it hard to get clear away from each subject of discussion?
And pray at what do you feel vexed?
I am not only vexed, but even alarmed when I think what reply I shall give if someone asks me, "Oh, Socrates, have you really then discovered that false opinion does not consist in the mutual relations either of the senses or the ideas, but in the right application of the sense to the idea?" And I suppose I shall answer, yes, piquing myself on the conviction that we have really made a clever discovery.
I do think, Socrates, that what we have now proved is very creditable to us.
You mean then, he will say, that a man, as man, that is, whom we only conceive, but do not see, can never be mistaken by us for a horse, which likewise we neither see nor touch, but have only an idea of, without any sensible perception of it whatever. That, I suppose, I shall say is what I mean.
And you will rightly reply.
What then, he will say? Is it not clear, according to your statement, that a man can never imagine the number 11, which he only thinks of, to be 12, which again he only thinks of? Come now, do you give an answer?
Well, I shall answer that if one actually saw or touched them, he might possibly think 11 things were 12, but that if he only has these figures in his mind, he never can form such opinions about them.
Okay, let's discuss now. Okay, any spontaneous reactions?
I don't quite get what Socrates is trying to get at.
Yes, and okay, that's a spontaneous reaction for sure. Helen, I see you hand.
Um, uh, is he talking about like learning wrong?
Yes, because I was going to ask what is the key concept here? Learning, and that word appear on page 103. But it's not only learning wrong, it's learning as a general process. Okay, what did I say for the page 84 to page 100? What did I say? What are the three main concepts summarizing pages 84 to 100? What did I say?
Word, imagination, and memory.
Exactly. If we have to use one word to summarize words, imagination, and memories, it's the process of learning. Okay, so those last 5 pages from 100 to 105 are about learning. Do you want to elaborate more on that, Helen?
No, it just seemed like if you learn wrong, that's not a good thing. I mean,
Okay.
like if you're given like information that's not true, you're gonna form false opinions, that's all.
Okay, it's cool.
That's it.
Do anyone want to explain the metaphor of the hair in the wax tablet?
The wax, that could be like our soul or something, where if it's not pure, there, we can have problems with how clearly we see the subject we're looking at.
Okay. I think your explanation is acceptable metaphorically, but can you be more technical in your explanation?
No.
Okay. Do someone wants to be more technical in the explanation about the hair in the wax?
Kind of pollution or dirtiness, or not, it's not clean, like it's
Okay.
It's a
But if
distortion.
sorry, who just talked?
It's a
Okay.
distortion.
Daniela.
Okay.
I know.
Yeah. Okay. Let's not forget the wax
If
tablet is a metaphor.
if you have hair in the wax,
Yeah.
as you etch into the wax, you're going to drag the hair along. So every word or image that you're going to describe is going to be fuzzy or misaligned or
Yes, sir.
an,
Yes, sir.
an incorrect impression into the wax. And so if you try, if you then use the wax as a metaphor for memory, your memory is likely going to be flawed because what you put into the memory was flawed. So it's unlikely that what you get out is going to be correct as either.
Garbage in, garbage out, yes.
Absolutely. I just want to read again some lines from page 103 when Socrates was speaking. When the wax is the mind's tablet is deep, in the mind's tablet is deep and smooth, and there's plenty of it, and it is sufficiently softened, then the ideas that came upon us through the senses, leaving their marks on this heart's core, as Homer called it, hinting at the resemblance of Kea to Keros, then these impressions, being made clear and distinct and deep enough, are lasting, and persons who are so favored by nature are in the first place apt at learning. Secondly, they have good memories, and thirdly, they do not misapply the marks left by the sensations, but form true opinions. Okay, so he was talking of learning, he was talking of memories, and he was talking of not misapply the marks left by the sensation, but for true opinions, meaning forming true conceptions. Okay, let's not forget that when we create conceptions in our mind, it's a form of imagination. Let's not forget that. So he was talking on the same paragraph of the three major concepts from the last 20 pages: words, memories, imagination, and the one word summarizing the three of them: learning.
But I have a problem with this.
Okay.
I mean, if you read, say, the Timaeus,
Yeah.
a lot of what you read in the last 2/3 sounds completely fanciful in today's world.
Okay.
So, in what sense is a true impression, or a true conception?
Yes, I agree with you, but
The form supposedly, are eternal, but the language that's used in the Timaeus about the God who created this perfectly spherical world without arms or legs or anything like that. I mean, today we would think that this is pure fantasy, right?
imagination.
So in what sense can you talk about a true impression? Can you talk about a true conception? Can you talk about remembering truth in the Platonic sense and passing through time, knowing that over time we hope, learn more and more about the real world?
Interesting objections. Before I propose my answer, I would like to hear the answers by the others.
I just have one because he says something. He's obviously throwing us off here because I'm like, when he says I'm not vexed but even alarmed when I think what reply I shall give if someone asks me, "Oh, Socrates, did you really then discover that false opinion does not consist in the mutual relations either of the senses or the ideas, but in the right application of the sense to the idea?" And I suppose I shall answer him yes, piquing myself on the conviction that we have really made a clever discovery. Then right after, so Theaetetus said, "Do you think, Socrates, that what we have now proved is very credible to us?" Socrates, you mean then, he will say, that a man as man, that is, whom we only conceive but do not see, can never be mistaken by us for a horse, which likewise we neither see nor touch, but have only an idea of without any perception of it, whatever. That, I suppose, I shall say is what I mean. Now, that's a bit of a mind bender here, but I'm thinking, like he's saying, if you have, I'm thrown off by, does not consist in the mutual relations either of the senses or the ideas, but in the right application of the sense to the idea, which he says is, he would call that a false opinion. But it's saying, like, if you have a conception of a horse and a conception of man, you're not going to get mixed up the conceptions. Like, you're not going to mistake your conception of a man for a horse. Those things as concepts are clear. But then it's the wording here is what I break down in. But I get that can be a, even if somebody doesn't know what they're dealing with in terms of perception, what they're perceiving, they can get mixed up about what they're perceiving, but the ideas of distinct things that they have, they're not mistaking the distinct forms as such. But I'm confused, but I feel like he's trying to do something about that. It's not the concepts that are being confused in this case, and he's relating that to false opinions versus true opinions.
Well, I think you're not confused. On the contrary, you explain the relations between the words and the perceptions, okay? Meaning that there is a conventional truth that is attributed to each word corresponding to the images coming from the sense perception and the images inside your memories. He's explaining the second line, intellect or conception. But going back to John, what do you think, Dave?
What do I think?
Or Dave?
Or I mean, I wasn't sure that it I wasn't sure how it applied, but I got the idea that, well, like with the sphere thing, he's creating like metaphor of sorts. The sphere thing, I need to reread it, but I am familiar with the overall when he's talking about imagining like how the composer would compose the universe, and if he had the choice between making it the most beautiful or less beautiful, he would choose the most beautiful. If he had the choice between making it the most good or the less good, he would make it the most good. And so Plato's talking
Okay,
about,
so if you just stay on that part of the Timaeus,
but I don't know that that
hold-
relates
I
to
hold
this.
that
But
I
yeah.
hold that to be universal. So you can almost read some passages of the Timaeus. It sounds like Leibniz did a copy and paste sometimes. And I think Kepler as well did a copy and paste of some of these passages. So there's some of these, so that's the idea that the universe, if it is knowable and is created, then it's created by a good guy who wants things.
The most reasonable.
Wants the
is it?
universe, yes, to be beautiful. What's the essence of the universe being beautiful? It is that it is self-sustaining. It doesn't need to be rewound the way Newton's world, Newton's universe, as parodied by Leibniz in the correspondence with Clarke, described that the universe is running down, and every once in a while God has to pull out his pull out the big key of the grandfather clock and wind it up again, and it's running down. So that part I have no problem.
But how are you relating that to
But
this?
there's other parts of the Timaeus which are just completely, essentially he's deriving an entire universe off of two sequences, 1, 2, 4, 8, and 1, 3, 9, 27, and from that he produces all of the
Proportions.
the chords, the Lacant, or the fifth, or the fourth, or the third, and so on and so forth.
Intervals.
And that's, thank you, and the comma. But and then from there he derives the universe, and from the four elements which are derived from triangles of two kinds. So basically, the whole universe is derived from those two things, these triangles and those two sequences. Now that's completely fanciful. So
Okay.
How are you relating that to this?
So
I
what
want to
I'm
know.
trying, the question is, so what was perceived as truth in Plato's time pertaining to understanding the universe? It sounds completely fanciful or naive or just pure fictional in today's world.
I'd like
That's
to interject here. When he's talking about like what's real and what's true, like I get the impression that it's almost like there is no absolute here. It's just, this is how much we know now, and their minds are always open to whatever's more to discover, right?
Right,
No,
Kelly, you
no,
get an
because if everything is about remembrance, then it was available to them too.
gentlemen,
You're going to start a fight, John. Like,
Yes.
I'm not trying to fight. This is the real problem I have with Platonism, and I really want to understand this.
I want to say
Yes,
one
yes.
last thing.
Okay, go, Dave.
The hypothesis is that the universe is made in the way that it's the most perfect and the most rational and most beautiful. That's the guiding hypothesis. And then working backwards from there, even assuming the assumption that's taken for acquis, for granted, is that the creator is all wise, the composer of the universe is all wise, and so he's made the universe the most perfect that it can be. And so getting into the mind of the composer, we would have to hypothesize how would the universe be composed if it were to be the most perfect. And with the intervals, you have like Leibniz's least action principle. It still holds.
Okay. Gentlemen, your discussion was very interesting on the absolute term. However, I would like to remind what Kelly just said 2 minutes ago, okay? And I would like to remind everyone that we are still at the level 2 of the 6 layers of the mind, meaning that in the quest for the truth, we only at the intellect. So there is no question of truth here. It's only a tool at the second layers, meaning that what is the essence of that paragraph is that the intellect can produce false opinion or true opinions. But the key word is opinion. It's not the absolute reality.
Okay.
So that's a very down to earth and technical explanation, but it's a good occasion for me to say, never forget the 6 layers of the mind. And we only at the second layer. So we still at at the level of the exploration of what is possible and what is not possible. And the conclusion at that level is that we can have true opinions or false opinions. And when it's true, it's because there is a harmony between the senses perception and the ideas with a small I, and not the ideas of beauty, goodness, and truth, but the ideas meaning the conception or the intellectual concepts that we put with those senses perception. Okay, that is the core message of those last 5 pages.
They could be true or false opinions, but they're still opinions.
Exactly, that is the key word. Okay, so never forget at what level of the mind we are speaking. That is a quite convoluted dialogue in general. But if you remember that paragraph, that pages on those 3, 5, 6, 20 pages, at what level of the mind are we when we discuss those stuff? Okay, 1, sense perception, 2, intellect, 3, the psyche, 4, beauty, 5, goodness, and 6, truth. We still have 2 minutes. Any final words?
I wanted to say on the subject of remembering, it's like humanity is evolving in our understanding, in our grasp of knowledge. And each of us on our own personal level have our own journey of epistemological growth, but we also have that for all of society. And then, we go through these cycles of, like falling into a dark age and coming under, tyranny. And then we begin to come out of that again. And so once again, it's like all of humanity trying to evolve to a higher level of epistemological growth. That remembering is something that we are all moving towards. And I don't think any of us have it completely yet. It's just a journey that we are all on together.
Yeah, there's a lot to remember.
That's good.
But when we get to go through things like, these men in previous ages that had such wisdom, it's like we get to recapture those pieces of knowledge that they had and incorporate them into our present reality. And so we can all move to a higher stage.
Yeah, the methodology of thought that's important here.
Exactly, the methodology. That's the key word.
Yeah,
the journey.
I mean, in a lot of the dialogues, there are not necessarily questions that bring forth answers. There are simply questions that bring forth a way of thinking, a state of mind, if you like.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well put. Yeah.
A state of mind and some provisional answers.
There's a good quote by Keats.
As always, this is what I find very interesting, both within the group as we discuss things, and, somebody like John comes along with a lot more knowledge of Platonic dialogues than, and I'd read them years and years ago studying politics, some of them, but that's 40 years ago. So a lot of it is forgotten, and I would obviously reinterpret them now if I was listening. But just in terms of alternative understandings of things, and I'll give you a simple example. I'm aware of scholarly studies that put a musical, theoretical underpinning, if you like, to all of the Platonic dialogues. That they're all written, you know, in keeping with an understanding that they had at the time of the world, you know, the harmony of the spheres, etc., etc., etc. That, you know, according to this analysis, and it's, you know, it's an academic analysis, you can see the harmonic framework in various of the dialogue. Now, whether it be true or not, I mean, all I'm saying there is that it's another way of you know, being asked to think about something. Never mind the content, if you like. Is this truth that you're reading when you're reading a Platonic dialogue? No, this is a way of, it's a methodology. It's a way of getting your mind to think about different things on different levels.
Exactly.
It's more a training, if you like.
Absolutely.
You know, more a journey than an arrival.
Yeah,
A
Kwan,
journey.
I know we're running out of time, but may I respond to?
Oh yes, yeah. We can take 2-3 minutes. Of
so-
course.
30 seconds.
On
30 seconds. Yeah.
on this notion of harmony, I think that's one of the things that. I mean, first of all, Plato obviously is channeling the Pythagoreans, but I think that's one thing that remains and is still valid. If anything, harmony was very much used as an intuition by Kepler. So the way I would view it, Paolo Sampi modernized Aristotelianism, and Kepler modernized Platonism. But I would say that even in today's world, with the all this better understandings of electricity and resonance across the universe, that still the notion of harmony is actually a very, very good starting point for understanding how the universe works. So I don't think it's, in fact, I think it's, you're saying that the harmony resonates all the way through Plato's dialogues. In fact, that's actually a very good perception. It's one of those things that we should remember. It still resonates in today's universe.
I think it's a good It's a good subject to end our discussion today.
Hear,
So
hear.
hoping to see all of you next Wednesday.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Nice
week.
to see everyone.
Thank
See
you.
you next
Bye.
week.
Have a good
Bye.
week, everyone.
Bye bye.
See you guys.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Paul, for the reference.
Yeah.